PepsiCo just announced a new science-led protein portfolio featuring Propel, Muscle Milk, and Starbucks Coffee Plus Protein. Sounds healthy, right? Until you realize they're redefining protein in a way that nature never intended. Here's the latest from PepsiCo. They're launching a science-led protein portfolio, and it's going to include Propel Clear Protein, a reformulated muscle milk, and Starbucks Coffee Plus Protein, each one of these promising to deliver the right protein at the right time to the right person. Sounds impressive, but this isn't about science. This is about ownership of the food narrative. And when corporations start talking about functional outcomes, what they're really doing is selling convenience dressed as health. And even more so, when a soda company starts telling you how to manage your protein intake, it's really time to ask, what happened to real food? What are the claims that PepsiCo is making? Well, first they're stating that this is a science-led protein portfolio. Science. That word's got a lot of ambiguity and question marks wrapped around it lately, and it seems like it's getting tossed around as a way to establish authority, which in reality many times just doesn't mean anything. They're also stating that this is outcome-based nutrition. What outcomes? What evidence do we have for these products even being in the market space? Have they been put in clinical trials? Have they shown consistent outcomes? Can they outpace true dietary protein sources? Much of this strategy that PepsiCo is presenting to us, which is wrapped in this umbrella of protein, is starting to sound more like an engineered product, which almost looks more like a pharmaceutical in many ways than it does a food, which of course are very different from each other. It's no doubt that protein is certainly a hot topic. I know I'm routinely asked about it, but one of the things that we have to look at in this conversation is that protein, as it's being referenced here in these products, is just a macronutrient. Just meet a protein level every day. But protein isn't just a macronutrient. Protein is actually a message to your body. And real protein, as you would find from pasture-raised meats, comes with many cofactors that your body recognizes. It's not simply about that protein, the number of grams of protein in that food source. It's also about the nutrients in there, all the fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, all the minerals like zinc, iron, selenium that are found in there, phosphorus. You've got enzymes in these foods. You've got the secondary metabolites from these pasture-raised sources, from these grass-finished sources that have their own therapeutic benefit. And you've also got peptides. Peptides is another big topic now, but quality protein sources in the diet contain peptides that are just not going to be inherently found on a routine basis just through these products that we're talking about that PepsiCo is trying to put into the market space and that they will put into the market space. And the other thing that's not accounted for here is the complexity in these foods, that they're also delivering healthy fats that are going to help nourish the cells. That's what you get from real protein sources. And on the surface, it may look like a very simple ingredient. In many ways, this is sort of the irony of this whole conversation, is that the more simplistic the ingredient, for example, beef or chicken or turkey, just a single ingredient, many times there's much more complexity in that food source than is being given acknowledgement towards. But when you compare that against some of these items that I'm going to show you, some of these introductions that PepsiCo is going to be leaning heavily on, what you'll see is that these labels are far more complex, but they don't deliver the same wellness perspective or wellness benefits to the human. So there's really that dichotomy there of the more complex the label, generally it's less beneficial for health, but the more simplistic the label, the more simplistic the ingredients, generally the better it's going to be for your health. And it just boils down to, when you start isolating these protein sources like they're making the effort to do here, they're stripping away a lot of that synergy that I'm alluding to that really is the building blocks of overall health. You just can't copy that. You can't mimic that with a formula. And there's no way that you can sit there and shake up a bottle of the muscle milk or mix up one of these Starbucks coffee plus protein and expect that you're going to get the same benefit from what you can get from a product that is truly derived from the animal being raised on living ground. That life in that ground complements and helps build the quality of that protein source and what comes along with that. And when you strip that element away, well, you're losing all of those benefits that are inherently associated with that. Your body's dependent on these things. Your body needs that health that originates from the land. But lest you think I'm just kind of out here talking and really just standing on the soapbox of pasture-raised meats, let me actually go through these labels with you and show you what's out there and what PepsiCo has in store. So the first thing I want to show you is just an article that's out here that is highlighting this. So this is going to be launching in 2026, and some of these are already out. The reformulated muscle milk, the Starbucks coffee plus protein, I'll show these to you. But when we go and we look at the Propel Clear Protein, at least at the time that I'm shooting this, hasn't hit the market yet. It's not showing up on their website. But you have to ask, if it's a clear protein and it can look like water, how many proteins do you ingest in your diet that look like water? Even if you're eating a good quality or consuming a good quality, say, whey protein, a non-denatured whey protein after a workout, is that clear? No, not even if you're using an unflavored version of that. So that really illustrates the point that we've got some engineering taking place here. So let me move on to the other one, which is the other two, one of which is going to be muscle milk. And I just picked one of these muscle milks, and I wanted to show you the label on this. And you'll notice here that we've got the fats, the carbohydrates, and the protein. But what I thought was really interesting on this label is that when you come down to the actual ingredients that are in here, you'll see things like soluble corn fiber. Well, what is soluble corn fiber doing in here? That doesn't make sense. And then the real problems, which many of you are probably going to point to, are going to be things like carrageenan. It's an established neurotoxin. Sucralose, asulfame potassium. These are all ingredients that have their own inherent problems. And if we just do a simple comparison on this, you're not getting exposure to those types of things when you're eating true pasture-raised meats, much less all of these other ingredients in here. And if you think about this from the other direction, what are you not getting in terms of nutrient quality? And I'm talking about micronutrient quality, not just macronutrients here, but true micronutrient quality, the vitamins, minerals, your antioxidants, the secondary metabolites. Well, you're not getting those things. And again, those are the elements that are ultimately going to help build your health and create a true foundation of health for you. And then you go on to the Starbucks protein or coffee plus protein, and you'll see they've got this one advertised now on their website. And it doesn't take long scrolling through this one where you start to see some real question marks pop up here. And I'm just going to pick a couple of these. And one thing I noticed really quickly on these is that I haven't been able to find the actual ingredients list on this particular page for Starbucks. Now, it may be in here somewhere hidden down, but they're certainly not making it easy to find. But even apart from that, if we just do a quick assessment on these and look at, for example, their vanilla protein matcha, it's a sugar-free, but it's still got quite a bit of carbohydrate in it, and especially when you start looking at the amount of fat to carb ratio and then the fats to the proteins, these are not what I would consider balanced. These are not what you're going to find if you're eating real protein sources in your diet. And then you see the same thing when you jump over here to this protein latte. So we get into the to the coffee, and you'll see we've got the same scenario here, which is you've got high carbohydrate content in this. This one's all the way up to 17 grams. So these are metabolically not advantageous. Let me just say it that way. These are not metabolically ideal. Whereas if you were consuming the real food would be more metabolically stabilizing for a number of reasons. Because it does have a better fat to protein ratio. It doesn't have the same carbohydrate load coming along with it. And it's not that this is a comment that is meant to be against carbohydrates. That's definitely not the case. I'm not suggesting to be against carbohydrates, but I am suggesting that the carbohydrates that one consumes should be of a quality nature. And since we can't actually see what this is, actually you can note here, you have to visit the Starbucks app for the full nutrition info. So they had rather you just kind of have to search for it through their app than actually be able to just quickly display it to you. And generally when they're doing that, there's probably something in there that most individuals aren't going to consider desirable to have in something that they're consuming. But you can just scroll through these. These are all going to be virtually the same. When you go through them, you'll see the same type of story playing out here. So when you look at companies like PepsiCo, they're betting that you're willing to trade your biology for branding. And I'm hoping that you're just not that gullible and naive about what's actually taking place here. I think most of you that are listening to this because you're acknowledging that you want better health and you're willing to do a deeper dive on your food. Frankly, these companies are banking on what they would call science, right? But science is just such a loosely utilized term that what does it actually mean in reality? Is science mean that there's some peer-reviewed data that we can look at, that this has actually been put to the test with humans? Or does this mean that there's just something that's been engineered to make you think that, oh, I'm meeting my macronutrient requirements, even though in reality, what you're maybe buying is just what would be labeled as a safer, ultra-processed product, just simply because of what it says on the label, trying to give you comfort. The truth is that when your food moves away from nature, you're going to lose a lot of nutrition in doing that. The closer you can keep your food intake to the way it was inherently designed in nature, the way that you would find it in nature, the greater nutritional value that you're going to derive from that. And it just, honestly, there's so much marketing that has to go behind what I've shared with you today to get you to see things in a different perspective. Acknowledge that point. The more marketing that is positioned to you, they're doing that for a reason. They're trying to, again, get you to look past the way your body inherently functions and to look at their branding and considering their branding to be ideal. The real educational points that you should take away from this and what ultimately matters when it comes to protein sourcing and quality, what is the transparency? Tell me about the ingredients. Help me understand where they came from, in terms of animal-based proteins. How was that animal raised? I want transparency in my food supply. That's what I should expect to see. Even if it's a whey protein, tell me about the whey protein. Where are those animals being raised at? What are the conditions that they're being raised in? And you'll notice that when it comes to any of these things that I've presented to you today, don't expect a trail of transparency. It's not going to be found, and you're not going to get answers to your questions, which inherently should raise red flags for you. What about the nutritional power? How much benefit is that protein source actually delivering? Look beyond what that label says in terms of just a protein count and think about the micronutrients, the other macronutrients that are in there. What about the secondary health promoting metabolites that can be found in there? Some of these peptides that I alluded to. These are all the things that you're going to give up. And when you look at some of these proteins and you go, oh, well, that's a great way to get a higher amount of protein at a lower cost, maybe just by adding it to something I'm already buying. Yeah, it is. However, what you're also not acknowledging on that is the cost of not having those other nutrients that I just listed in that protein source. You're going to pay the price for that somewhere. What about the amino acid balance? You need an optimal balance of amino acids. Based on the way that these proteins are in here, can we validate that that's giving an optimal amino acid protein profile? No, you really can't, especially the one that really raises a red flag on me that we can't answer yet is that Propel Clear Protein. There's certainly going to be some question marks related to that one. I mentioned the other nutritional factors, the other nutrient cofactors in there, like the vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, but don't forget about the other macronutrients. You want a good balance of your fats, your high-quality fats in there as well, and you need that. And then overall digestibility and usability of these proteins. Are these proteins denatured? Denatured proteins can be challenging for some individuals to to digest and manage, especially if you're someone who is just starting to make changes with your diet. You may find that it's a challenge to be able to handle some of these denatured proteins. You may wonder, why am I reacting to this? It's because it's not a real protein. It's been changed and manipulated in some way. Whereas if you were consuming real pasture-raised animal-based meats, you wouldn't likely run into some of these same challenges because you've got a more balanced amino acid profile, but you're also not dealing with a denatured protein either. So there's quite a few considerations here, right? There's a lot of things that animal-based proteins can do that these proteins, and I'm just using PepsiCo as a single example on this, guys. Don't get so fixated on PepsiCo. You got to just take the information I'm sharing with you today and be able to look at it beyond what PepsiCo is going to be introducing in 2026. But there's an ideal solution here, and it comes from ranches like here at Harvest Hills Ranch, right? We don't manufacture nutrition. We nurture nutrition into food. We let our animals graze on diverse forages. We're grazing all year round. They're absorbing the nutrients. They're passing directly onto your plate, right? So when that animal goes and eats that from that living ground, it goes into that living animal, and then it goes into you to promote life in you and based on your food habits and your food intake as well. That's what functional nutrition looks like. It doesn't come from a label. And, fortunately, when you're sourcing from ranches like Harvest Hills Ranch, you're getting that functional nutrition without the label and without all the spin associated with it. If you've been told to drink your protein, remember this. Health doesn't come from a bottle. It comes from real food, optimizing your biology, that food is raised on land that's being stewarded appropriately. Because when you start believing the food science over food itself, you risk losing the very foundation of what your body depends on. And that same misunderstanding, well, it's also showing up in how most doctors are going to interpret your blood work too. So before you click away, why don't you head on over to my next video, What If Your Doctor is Wrong About Food and the Truth About Your Blood Work? And here I'm going to break down why conventional lab markers often miss the real story your food is telling. I'll see you over there.